I felt like I was a playboy, I wanted to, one of my silly goals, I wanted to hear an orgasm in every language. So I thought get married, I thought well, that just leads to divorce.
Welcome to the On Fire Podcast, episode 12.
With your hosts, Matt
and Kellen. On Fire is a weekly podcast where we discuss financial independence, life hacking, frugality, minimalism, and living within your means. Matt, it's your turn. The part about reviews.
January 4th. January 4th is the last time we received a written review. So I got beef with our audience right now. Unless you're one of the 7 people that have left us a written review on iTunes like John Evans did, just know I got mad beef with you.
This episode is brought to you by OREC 2018, a 2-day event being held at the London Convention Centre in Canada on May 26th and 27th. If you wanted a chance to come out to meet a bunch of our previous guests, this would be your opportunity. Guys like Graham Stephan, Jeff Weibo, Michael Rosehart, Dan Warren, and a ton of others. Check out their website at orec2018.com. They've also offered a discount code for On Fire listeners, so check it out and use the coupon code LDNOnFire to drop the price to $50 for the weekend.
Full disclosure, I'm the host of OREC 2018, and this advertisement only cost me $50 right now because no one else is bidding against me. If you're interested in becoming a future sponsor, slide into our DMs on Instagram at On Fire Podcast.
Today's guest, Aron, is financially independent in Singapore. He was born in the US, lived in Australia, Indonesia, and all over the world.
I found Aron's backstory just fascinating. Moving to other countries for work, building up a new nest egg in each country. It's just such a unique perspective.
But anyway, let's dive into the interview with Aron.
Awesome to have you on the show, Aron. Thank you so much for joining us. One of the first segments we'd like to kind of dive into is back to the roots. So can you just kind of walk us through your background and how you discovered the idea of financial independence? Was it a book, a blog?
Yeah, thanks for having me. And I'm excited to talk to you guys tonight. I stumbled onto the terminology on Reddit. Like the phrase financial independence is fairly new to me, but the idea of it goes way back to when I was young and a child. I guess my grandfather was financially independent pretty early on, around 40 years old. And growing up, I used to always think of my grandparents as the way they lived. I thought, oh, they're poor, they didn't, because they were frugal. They saved things, but they had 3 farms. They owned a lot of land. They never had worries. I learned a lot from them.
Do you think they passed down a lot of their frugality and that kind of thing to you? Do you think that had a big impact on your upbringing?
My mother always says, "Oh, you're just like your grandmother. You're just like your grandmother." So when I grew up, I really loved my grandmother, being around her. But she wore thrift store clothes. She had short hair, which was kind of strange for a woman back then, but it was easy. That's why she did it. She had a good job. She worked at General Electric, a big company for a while. She was executive secretary. And when I was younger, that didn't mean much to me. But now I also work for a big company, and I understand, so she was responsible for some things that were pretty important back then. And my grandfather, he owned a tire business. So this was back in the 1960s when they, I guess, accumulated their money, and then he sold that tire business, and that's the point where he became financially independent. He would have never used that word, and he would have never really he didn't really want people to know what he had. And to this day, I still really don't know what they have. My brothers told me it's a lot more than you would think, but they're real conservative. My grandfather's since passed on, but my grandmother's still living. I guess he enjoyed farming. They had a dairy farm, and I grew up on that dairy farm. So that's where I learned, about working and work ethic. And that was really good, a real privilege that I also didn't appreciate until I was older. It was just, to me, it just seemed like that's what people did. I didn't think it was all that special. But now, people want to go on vacations for farm stays and stuff. And not many people get the opportunity to grow up on a farm. So I guess a lot of it came from that. But the terms back to that mostly came from Reddit. I like to read Reddit, and I stumbled onto that subreddit.
It's funny. I know Matt's been in this game a lot longer than I have, in terms of he was back in the early retirement extreme days, which was one of the first initial blogs that pioneered this idea. I found it probably through Reddit as well.
So, Aron, if you can, just walk us through your story. What did your journey to financial independence look like, and what caused you to move around from country to country?
Well, how that happened, I never intended it, honestly. I really liked where I lived. And when I went to college, I applied at schools in my state because it was cheaper and I didn't have that much money saved. So I got into a school it's called the Virginia Military Institute. I didn't have to pay hardly anything to go there for 4 years. I think I paid $4,000 for 4 years and got a computer science degree.
Wow, interesting.
And so I'd been working on the farm before that. Farm work, you get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, hot, cold. It's hard. I wanted to work in the air conditioning. That was my goal.
The air conditioning repair school.
Yeah, I know. It's a small goal, but I remember that's how I thought. And they had an advertisement up for research interns for the summer. They were doing research between the chemistry department and the computer science department. We were working with robotic arms. So I threw my name in the hat, and it's a small school. There weren't that many of us. So I think it was me and one other guy that applied for it, and they picked me. So I spent the summer between my freshman year of college and my sophomore year. I just stayed in school. I didn't go home. I stayed there, lived in we called it the barracks, like a dormitory, because it was a military school. That was the first time I got on an airplane because we got to present our research at some conference in Boston. The following year, I went to the career services there that we had at the school and said, I want to get an internship. I'd heard someone else talk about an internship. I didn't really have great guidance or coaching in my life, but I heard, you can make some good money in the summer with an internship. And this guy, he had a friend. It was kind of like a connection. He was networked into this big pharmaceutical company called Merck. And at the time, it was one of the most admired companies in America. It was a really good place to have an internship. I went there and I think I made $13 an hour, which I thought was huge money for the summer. And again, I was in the air conditioned, and I was in the school I went to was all boys. So I was around some girls from the other colleges. I just thought it was great. It didn't even feel like work. It was a great summer.
Yeah.
Following that, I got to do an exchange program. A lot of people do their semester abroad, but we were in the midst of a big Supreme Court case. It's kind of famous. And from that time, it was all in the newspaper. We were the last all-male military college in the country, or the last all-male school. And so the Supreme Court of America forced the school to integrate women. And part of the plan with that was that they needed to bring women from other military schools in the country. They had an exchange program. And to make it affordable, they traded some of us around. And I got to go to Texas for a semester to a big school called Texas A&M. So that was the first time I was really away from my home state. And I really love Texas. Texas is almost like a different country in America. They call themselves Texicans. Texas for a while was its own country. They talk a little different. They really have culture there. I remember the first thing I learned was I hadn't been there a day. They taught me how to two-step. You still ask girls to dance there. It was just, so I had a cultural experience. I always refer to it as my semester abroad, although it wasn't abroad.
I love that.
And I came back and did another internship with that same company, Merck. I had a computer science degree and graduated in 1999, which was the peak time to have a computer science degree.
Absolutely.
That was right before the dot-com bust. I mean, it was like months before. So you could just if you had a computer science degree, you could write your ticket. Every interview I went to, I got a job. I got a job offer from NASA, Lockheed Martin, IBM. I got 4 from the company with the internship that I had, Merck, this pharmaceutical company. Some of the jobs, most of them, I didn't even understand the job description, honestly. But, I'm a new college student. I'm trying to act like I know what's going on.
Okay. Fake it till you make it.
Oh, yeah. I just graduated, yeah. But a few of them said, the reason I picked the one I did is that it listed travel. It said something like, it's going to require travel like 25% of the time or 50% of the time. And it said, places like Australia and Europe. And I thought, well, this sounds awesome. I thought, I don't understand the rest of what it is. It was about software testing and development. But the travel part sounded cool. It was in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. So I moved to Philadelphia. I knew another guy from my school that moved up there too. Actually, two guys. One of them went to grad school there, and another one started a job somewhere else. So we got a place together, shared a place for about a year. I worked in this little gray cubicle. The job turned out not to be like what I had expected, although I did get quite a bit of travel. I went to Puerto Rico, Europe, Canada, worked a little bit in Montreal, up and down the east coast of America. So I started traveling a little bit, but it was like, 1 week at a time, 2 weeks at a time. It was nice to get away from the office, but the office was this building. We must have had 1,000 cubicles in that building, these little gray cubicles. And the place was really politically correct. And honestly, I was really not a happy person. I wanted to go back to Virginia, where I was from. And I thought,
right, you didn't feel very free there. It sounds like.
Yeah. I started looking online. They had an internal job posting board. And what I was really trying to do was get back to Virginia, where I was from, near my family, where I'd started out with that internship. So I'd go on there and look what job openings there were, and I'd post for them. And a lot of them were just long shots. I'd be bored at work, and I would just, post up my resume. I must have applied for 50 of them. And one of them was in Australia. And honestly, it's still to this day, I don't know how I got this job really. I guess I just did good in the interview because it was in manufacturing. And this was a manufacturing company. They make medicine. Well, they do research, development, sales. I was in a supporting role for a laboratory. But I didn't have any experience with chemical engineering or engineering of any kind, really. But I guess I did good in the interview, or I must have said something right. And the interview was a lot like we're doing right now. It was like a Skype sort of thing, like a remote thing. So apparently 12 people applied for it, and I got the job. But it wasn't a sweet expat deal like a lot of people get. A lot of people go on assignments with these big companies, and they pay for your house, and you get a lot of benefits, flights back and forth. All I got, and I'm appreciative of this too, looking back, they gave me $3,000. They gave me a one-way ticket, and I was no longer a U.S. employee. I became an Australian employee. So the company saw me. It's kind of funny. It's like I'm two different people. It caused some issues in the system because in a big company like that with 60,000 people, they give you a number. I got to Australia that way, and that was actually the moment that I got out of debt too, because I had. After I finished school and I was kind of depressed in Philadelphia, so I bought myself a new truck, and I had a girlfriend and got engaged to her. I bought her a diamond ring, all that on credit, So I'd run up some debt on my credit card. I'd done some stupid things, not a huge amount of debt, but I still wasn't in this mode where I was saving. But that was the moment that I paid off everything. I had $4,000. And I think that's the moment that I feel like I became financially free. I always say this when I talk to people. I think you really don't get any more free than when you have enough in your emergency fund. Your emergency fund keeps bigger and bigger, and gets bigger, and you can deal with longer emergencies. That's kind of how I've always looked at it. I'm the early retirement side. I'm not as keen as a lot of people are, because some part of me enjoys having a purpose and working, and the skill set that I've built up. It just aligns to working for a corporation. I don't think I'm going to sit down and write a book or go be a ski instructor. I think I probably will. I might, cut back or change things, that sort of thing.
Totally. I think with FIRE, it's almost unanimous, it seems. People are very interested in the idea of financial independence, but very few people are interested in the idea of actually retiring. I think the retire early part of it is the sexy thing that you hear when you're working in your cubicle and you're like, I want to get the hell out of this job. But once you get to close, or when you get to financial independence, you're not actually interested in retiring. You're not interested in not doing anything. You're going to start pursuing other passions and working on the things that you actually want to work on.
It just gives you a lot more options. And even at this point, I was only 27 years old at this time. And like I said, I only had $4,000, and I left this part out, but I had to take a pay cut. And I almost didn't do it because of that, because I felt it was so insulting, that you should always get a pay rise. And a lot of people, actually, most people advised me not to do it. It had more to do with the exchange rate. And it also had to do with big companies, you have to understand that there's salary bands and everything's real controlled. They don't make big exceptions. And like I said before, this was a new area of the business for me. So I really wasn't worth that more looking back. But for about a day, I was like, no, I'm not doing it. It's off the table, and then I slept on it. And I thought, this may be the only chance I get in my life to go to Australia on such a good deal. They're going to cover my visa. I've got support here. I'm just going to take the risk because it felt like a risk. So
Totally, it is. Yeah.
and that's when I started getting frugal too. It was a good opportunity to start, on a clean slate. Like I didn't buy a new car this time because when I left Pennsylvania, I sold that new truck that I'd bought, and the depreciation was shocking. I hadn't had it that long, but I'd been making payments on it. I barely got enough to just cover what I owed on it, and I realized what a dumb move that was. So I got there. They gave me $3,000. They gave me the option of putting me up for a month in a hotel and giving me a rental car. But I knew a guy there, and he said, just stay at my house. And I talked him into giving me the money. So it was like $3,000. And then some guy at work was selling a car, and he wanted $2,500 for it. And I said, I just tried it. It was like a crappy car, and I thought, oh, maybe if it works for 6 months, it's still a win. So I said, well, I have $1,000. I said, will you take 1,000? And he'd been trying to sell it for a while. And he was like, okay, whatever. I guess his wife was on his case or whatever. So I got this car for $1,000. Now, it looked like $1,000 car too. I don't want you to think that it was, that great of a car. And the other thing, I drove it home. I just bought it. I drove it home or to this guy's house I was staying with. The thing caught on fire on the way home. They had to turn on the air. So it was pulled up the hood. It had something to do with the air conditioner. I remember it was like a low point. I was like, oh, I'm such a fool. I took that $1,000 and I bought this car, and now it's on fire. It didn't last half an hour. It was literally the ride home. So I took it to this Australian mechanic the next day. He fixed it for like $30. Now, when I say he fixed it, he sorted it out. The air conditioner never worked again. So I always had to just roll down the windows. But I drove that car for 3.5 years. So for $1,000. And at the end of 3.5 years, it barely would go anymore. But it was good enough that I drove it to the junkyard, and they gave me $400 for scrap for it. So for 3.5 years, $600 I spent on that car. And I don't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
$200.
Yeah, so think of all
Hard to go wrong.
I remember I thought once about, I probably saved, if I'd have bought a new car or something, I don't know, it would have been tens of thousands of dollars I saved on transportation costs. Also, I tried not to drive it that much because I knew that it wasn't a great car, and, that something could go wrong. I didn't live that far from work, and I'm in Australia, good weather, so I started biking. So I bike to work almost all the time. And I got this idea that if I'm going to move this car, I'm never going to move this car for one reason. I'm always going to do at least two things. And so I started keeping lists of stuff. If I have to do errands, I'd go out and do everything at once. And I started thinking in things like
Nice.
Not just money, also time, because really time is a bigger thing than money. You run out of time, you don't get time back. You can find ways to make more money, but time is we always learn time is money. Time equals money. People say that all the time. But I think once you figure out, time's greater than money, that's when that's the real truth. So
I totally agree. That's a great way to look at things. I mean, time is money when you're working time for money. But when you start earning money in ways that aren't necessarily time for money, all of a sudden you start realizing I can make money and not waste all my time on it. I can start using my time for other things. So what ended up bringing you to other countries in the world? Like, you've lived in a lot of places. What brought you to some of these,
so
like Singapore,
right
Indonesia?
Now, but it was Australia that sort of led to all this. So then I got super networked in Australia I met people from everywhere. Australia is a country about the size of Canada, but with only about around 20 million people. Maybe it's a few more than that now. It was 20 million when I was there. And they're all in the cities. The middle's empty, and there's a lot of immigrants, people from everywhere else. My boss was an English guy. So I worked there for 7 years. Near the end of the time, the Australian dollar got really strong. We were a small factory. There was a merger with the company. The economy was bad. This was around 2010, So they announced the closure of this factory. I was ready to go at that point because I hadn't got promoted. I was a bit homesick too. I was ready to get back home. But by then I'd become an Australian citizen, or I was really close to becoming an Australian citizen at that point. So I wanted to get that because you can be an American and an Australian. You can have dual citizenship. So I thought if I ever want to come back, then I won't have to get visas. I can come on my own terms and all that.
Well, that'd be super powerful. That'd be an amazing thing to be able to just go to another continent anytime you want.
Yeah. Well, I have, and I built up savings there. I still have a nest egg there. And also with Australian citizenship, you have the right to live and work in New Zealand as well. So, or vice versa. If you're a Kiwi, you can live and work in Australia. It's almost like a different state.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
So, I'm like you guys. I'm a subject of Her Majesty the Queen. I had to swear an oath to a picture of the Queen. It was kind of funny,
I've never done that, at least not my memory.
What's that?
You're born in here.
Oh yeah, we're born into it. We don't have to.
Yeah, you're born into it. And there's a lot of Canadians in Australia too. That's where I've met most of the Canadians because it's a Commonwealth country. Australia and Canada are real similar in their way of life. You guys, your accent's more American, but your culture is probably more close to Australia. And the weather's so good and all there. So Sydney's just a beautiful city too, really expensive. That was the drawback. And that's why I wanted to leave because I was like 35 by then. I think I was 34, 35 and everybody else buying a house, having kids. And I'm still living with roommates, now it's starting to get to me. Although I had a really awesome roommate there. This is a little side story that's almost unbelievable, but so they're closing that factory down that I was telling you about. And I lived with this guy that also worked in the factory. And one part of the factory was a laboratory that did testing. And that was the first place they were going to close. They went out, they had this lottery syndicate. They went out and bought lottery tickets every week. Australians gamble a lot. I think it's the biggest country for gambling. And I used to, because by then I was really into saving money and math and everything. I sat down with him a few times and I told him, I said, look, gambling's just a tax for people that don't understand math. You've got to quit doing this. It's just a waste of your money. Probably not 1 month after I had that conversation with him, they hit the biggest Australian lottery jackpot in history. It was a $48 million lottery jackpot. And there's no taxes on lottery winnings in Australia, 48 million free and clear. But it was 16 of them. So 16 of them split that $48 million jackpot. Oh, yeah. And there's also 2 winning tickets. So they actually got 24 million to split 16 ways. But it was still 1.5 million apiece. So we weren't even 30 years old yet. I guess we were right around 30 then. And so I thought, actually, I'm the one that broke the news to him. He was on vacation at the time. He just didn't believe it. I called him on the phone. I said, you got to get home. You've hit the big one. He thought it was a joke. I would have been the same. The guy comes home, and I thought, well, I'm going to have to find another roommate. Your roommate becomes a millionaire. There's no need for a roommate anymore. And we really got along good as roommates. We lived in a nice place. What we decided, actually, when we met each other, we both lived in kind of crappy places. And we decided, instead of just trying to save as much money as we can, let's get a nice place. We'll still save a good bit of money, but let's get a nice place together we can be proud of, have girls over, stuff like that. So we had a place right on the water. It was good. We enjoyed each other's company. We'd become good friends, although we didn't know each other before we moved in together. And he said no.
Well, at the end of the day, you still have a roommate, so you're still probably coming out ahead of a lot of people.
Roommate. God, that's the other thing. I talked about a car, but car and roommate, if you want to save money, those are the 2 most important things. People are always worried about saving money on groceries, that's a good idea, but how much can you really save on your groceries? If your grocery bill is $500 a month, the most you can save is $500. When you start cutting your rent in half and your utilities and you cut your car expenses to nothing, you can't save in other categories like that. And also roommates give you other benefits, like I was talking about, like being friends, and there's social benefits to it. You meet their friends. I really enjoyed having roommates, actually. I was kind of sad when I finally did move out on my own. But anyways, back to this lottery story. So I thought the guy would move out, but he was like, no, I really like living with you. And I'm not going to change anything. I'm just going to see what happens next. Because the next thing is we're all getting laid off from work. They've already announced the factory closure. So in Australia is a good place to get laid off from work because they have a lot of laws. They call it redundancy there. I don't know what the word is in Canada. In America, we say layoff.
Oh, yeah.
But in Australia, it's redundancy. You get the package or the formula is really good. They don't tax you on any of it. Anyways, I got 14 months pay. I got more than a year's pay, tax free. It was nearly $100,000 all at once. And he got something like that too. So we just, rode it out to the end. And 1 week later, after I lost, it wasn't even a week. So I knew I better get right on getting a job. Although a lot of people were like, oh, I'm just going to take some time off, relax. And I guess I respect that decision. I see why a lot of people would do that. But for me, I remember it was like an identity crisis. At first, it was the happiest day of my whole career, which is kind of ironic. It's almost like getting fired. They bring you in, but I couldn't get the smile off my face. I just got this 6-figure check, I thought this is awesome, just double my savings or something like that. And I didn't know what the future held, but and I went to a pub in Sydney. And when it hit me is, I guess when you talk to girls, particularly in Sydney, there's 2 questions they ask you within the first 30 seconds. Where do you live and what do you do? And I had to answer that question, what do I do? And suddenly I couldn't answer. I'm unemployed. I just felt super uncomfortable about that. I guess it's a psychological thing. I think a lot of men are like that. You tie yourself so much to your job. So I just got right into it, got right into looking for a job. And it didn't take me a week. And the new job, I got a $10,000 raise over what I was making before and didn't have to spend a cent of that money that I got. It's still in the savings account in Australia. I put it all in an index fund and it's, more than doubled since then. So, and I'll just leave it until I don't know what I'll do really with it. One day I'll go back to Australia, I think, since I'm a citizen, and maybe I'll use that money to buy a house. I don't know for sure.
Good to have these options. That's pretty neat.
Yeah, just leave it sit there. A few times I've thought, when the exchange rate fluctuates, have a condo I could pay off in America. But it always come to the conclusion, no, it's best just to leave that nest egg right where it's at. And, because it kind of, it's like diversity, they say, diversify your savings so that if something goes bad in one area, you still have the other to, back you up.
So what ended up bringing you to Singapore then?
Well, I went to China for a little bit, but that was pretty brief in that new job. I didn't like the new job where I got the raise. It was like a small company, but I needed to kind of bridge things for a little bit. I tried to like it, but I didn't like it. So as soon as I got an opportunity, my brother, he's into mortgages in Utah, and his wife was selling houses and she got pregnant. And this was during the foreclosure crisis in America. There were just foreclosures galore. And they had a link with Fannie Mae, which is the big underwriter for the mortgages in America. He lived with some guy in college that worked for Fannie Mae. So they were kicking him all the foreclosures. So when you get a foreclosure, when you're the real estate agent for a foreclosure, you kind of have to act like the owner of the house. It's a little bit different than selling a normal house where people actually care about it. With foreclosure, the people don't care. They know they're losing it. So sometimes you have to start with kicking the people out, evicting them. You always have to replace the carpet and paint at minimum. Sometimes it's worse than that, So there's a lot of fixing you have to do. You have to track all the expenses, charge it back to the bank. They cut the fee. But the good thing is you get the listing. You get the listing. Listing's great in real estate because then people come to you. My brother's wife was pregnant and it was just too much work for her. They were getting so many. So he said, look, you can be a real estate agent. It takes like a month. I think I did all the class online. It was pretty easy to get licensed. So I started helping with that and sold foreclosures, learned about short sales, bought a condo of my own. And also in that time, I picked up a night shift job. It matched up really well with the real estate job because working night shift, then I'd meet people at work that were looking for houses, so it was a good way to stir up some business. And I would just go around and door knock too, because people didn't understand what to do. So many people would lose their job and they couldn't pay for their house. And they would publish, it's on the public record, it's called Notice of Default. So I'd get the list of the notice of default every week. Notice of default is the first step in the foreclosure process. So if a house shows up on a notice of default, there's like a 90% chance that property there's going to be a transaction on that property in one way or another. And the banks were changing their policy. Foreclosures aren't a great way to do business. They lost more money with foreclosures than they did with short sales, because short sales, then the people have some incentive not to tear the place up, to leave it in good condition. They still had some leverage. So I started looking for those, and I would just go around knocking on doors. It was you get different reactions. Some people were just in complete denial, or you might, like, sometimes the wife would answer and she'd have no idea that the husband wasn't making the payments. I don't know, how some people felt about it. Not many people would do it like I did it, but I stirred up some business that way. Maybe I'd have to knock on 100 doors, but then I'd get a listing. You get a listing, and then you get more business, you get sales. And so I know one month I was making on the side, I made like $20,000. Not every month, but some months, wow. And most months you make nothing. But then other months you close several, and you make, a lot of money in addition to my regular job. So
that's the life of an entrepreneur. A lot of people try and do that with their day job. They're working their day job, and then on the side, they're working on their side hustle. And then sometimes eventually their side hustle gets to the point where they're making more than they are at their day job, at which point they tend to pursue their side hustle full time.
And I don't know about every side hustle, but of all the side hustles, or as they're called, side hustles, it's really easy to get a real estate license. You don't have to be anything special. You just have to pass the test, and you don't have to really commit that much time to it, So I think if you sell one house a year, I figured it out once, one house a year, it makes it worth it. 2, you're winning. So, and if you sell 4 or 5, you're doing great. You can also work another job. Actually, I think it's in your best interest to work another job, because it keeps your network of people bigger, and you find more deals. I mean, I hate to badmouth real estate agents, but all you really do is show people where to sign their name on the form and open doors. It's not, and I know some are better than others, and they'll tell you, they have skills, and some do. It's mostly people skills. My sister-in-law is really good at it. I'm not particularly good at it. I know I'm not the real salesman type. And I also didn't like there's a lot of sleazy things in real estate too. And I'm more of a, especially with foreclosures and short sales, people would do things like offers would come in and you don't show them that offer, or they lie on their offers. I know one offer came in and they said they're going to put 25% down, but they didn't have 25% down. But at closing, no one cares as long as you come up with the money. But, little things like that. And people don't even think it's lies in real estate. It's just how they do business. But I didn't really feel comfortable with a lot of that stuff. Not that it was I don't think it was super unethical, but it wasn't really my style. And also the amount of time. So after a while, I was kind of burnt out on it. And another opportunity came up that got me eventually to Singapore. A guy called, so they'd shut down that factory in Australia, and a guy I used to work for had moved to Indonesia. They were trying to set up the same operation in Indonesia, much lower cost, but they were doing the same sort of thing we were doing in Australia. So he offered me a job of 6 months to work as a consultant. So I had a few days. He said I could go through an agency or I could set up my own business. So I figured out in like 2 or 3 days how to set up my own corporation. Not a whole lot to it, but I set up an S Corp and moved to Indonesia. 6 months turned into 4 years there. In order to avoid Indonesian taxes, Indonesian tax law says if you work in the country more than half the year, it's like 182 days or something, then you have to pay Indonesian taxes. But if you work less than that, 6 months or less, then you don't pay taxes to Indonesia. So I would work 1 month there and 1 month off. Since I didn't have any reason to go home, no family, wasn't married or anything, I would just take my month off. I'd go to the Philippines, Thailand. I went to Rome once. My salary quadrupled, I think, and my taxes went almost to nothing. My whole life was an expense. I lived in hotel rooms for, I think, more than 800 days, nearly 3 years. Almost all 5-star hotel rooms too.
Wow.
Wow.
because it's Asia, Southeast Asia. I was like, I mean, money goes so far. And then I met a air hostess. I met her on Tinder, actually. That's why I'm now in Singapore with 2 babies. I never thought I'd get married. I never thought I would, but she and I got together, got married, and she got pregnant really fast. And my life changed. And I tried to work in Indonesia for a while longer. Both of my kids were born in Indonesia, and I really liked Indonesia. But then I got this. I guess my mentality changed a little bit. Indonesia's a bit wild, There's like it's chaotic, and I really liked that for a while. But then when I had kids, I started like worrying about their safety and their education and things like that. And Singapore is like the safest city in the world. It's really secure. So a job came up here through the same channel, all from Australia, all that network there, same people. Some of them were working here in Singapore. Then I came here about 6 months ago, and I really love it here. I'm surprised how much I really like Singapore because it's got a lot of laws and restrictions, and I thought I wouldn't like that, but I guess so many of the bad things don't happen here. Like we don't have drugs, we don't have crime, we don't have graffiti. So you take away all those things, and it's just such a pleasant place to live. We never hardly ever lock the door just at night. We leave it open in the day. It's a good city for biking. I don't have a car. We bike everywhere. Public transport.
So building off the idea of Singapore, I think a lot of our listeners probably have kind of a preconceived notion that it's an expensive place to live. What's kind of been your experience with that, Aron?
That's exactly what I thought too. And I'd always thought that. Now I traveled through Singapore a lot when I was working in Indonesia, and I would never go out. I would just be like, I'd stay, I'd make it as short as possible, and I'd go on to Thailand or wherever else because of the expense. And you go buy a round of drinks, it's like $200 here. Easily, you spend $200 if you're buying them for other people. $25 a drink, yeah, it's crazy. That kind of stuff. I think it depends on the point that you're at in your life. So I'm actually at a pretty good point because I'm not. If I was dating and going out a lot, like alcohol is expensive, entertainment's expensive. But with 2 young children who aren't in school is the other thing too. School's really expensive here. So I might find it out of my price range or less desirable. But with a 6-month-old and a 20-month-old who are just in preschool, or the 20-month-old's in preschool, preschool's like, it's about $130 a month. It's like 2 hours a day. That's a bargain. He speaks 3 languages. He's natively learning 3 languages. That's priceless. We don't have a car. We have a huge, by Singapore standards, we have a huge flat. It's not in the trendy part of town, but it's close to work. Everyone here is really good neighbors, really good public transport. Like that's not expensive. Food is cheap. You can, if you eat like a local, or if you live like a local, really, because there's a lot of people in Singapore that only get paid like $1,000 a month. I think a whole lot around on $2,000 a month. So, and I make a good bit more than that. I mean, I don't make like a huge salary or anything. I make for my age, right at 6 figures, but my wife doesn't have to work, but we've got a nanny that lives in the house or the apartment.
And so if I could actually just jump in there, Aron, I'm not sure. Are you familiar with Mr. Money Mustache?
Yeah. I've read that. I enjoy it. That's a really good blog.
And so I'm sure you've probably seen, he constantly refers to the Internet Retirement Police. So I'm sure the Internet Retirement Police would be barking right now about the fact that you guys have a nanny. Can you kind of walk through how that actually works with kind of a lean fire perspective, and just what does that actually look like?
We don't have family here, first of all. So my wife doesn't have anyone to fall back on. It's just her. And we have 2 kids in diapers. She's breastfeeding both of them, and I'm working. And also the culture in Singapore, everyone has a nanny. People have nannies for their dogs here. Older people, elderly people, almost everyone has a helper that lives in their house. It's regulated by the government. We pay a tax on it.
Oh my God, actually?
It costs us around 1,000 Singapore dollars a month, counting all the taxes and the payment that she gets. And there's an agency fee. So it's not like crazy cheap, but think about, we don't have a car. We're not spending anything on a car. We stay at home a lot. Our house is immaculate.
I read on your blog before that like there's all sorts of free things to do, low cost stuff. Healthcare is reasonably priced. Weather you say is tropical. It's got an amazing airport. It's really safe. There's no crime. So like,
I think it's the best.
why is it that you
It's the
think
best
that
city
not
in the world.
everyone's already living here? Is it a challenge to get a visa there? How does that all work?
Well, I think one of the reasons that it's one of the best cities in the world is they're picky about who they let in here. You have to have something to offer to be here. You can't just, hey, I'm going to move to Singapore. You have to be the sort of person Singapore wants. You have to have a skill set they want, or you have to, be an investor. To move here as an investor, you have to have a huge amount of money. I think one of the Facebook guys did it. I heard something about it. He renounced his American citizenship and moved here as an investor because of the low tax rate. So Singapore's like a really, really low tax rate. I think probably the reason a lot of people don't move here is that they're just really restrictive on who they allow to come. We've thought about, because I like it so much, I've thought about staying, becoming a permanent resident. But there is one issue with that. I have 2 sons, and if every male permanent resident or Singaporean, they all have to serve 2 years in the military, which I don't think is necessarily bad. Actually, I don't mind it. I think that there's some positives to it, but I just don't really like making that decision for other people, for my kids. So that's given me some pause. But if it wasn't for that, I think I'd stay right here. I like the job, and I'm going to stay here for a while. I'm going to stay here for as long as I can, but I guess you have less freedom here too. People talk about that you have less freedom, but I haven't really noticed it. Like, I don't know what they mean by that. Maybe you can't go have protests or something, but I'm not a protester. I'm not like really into politics. I don't know. Maybe shoot a gun. I don't have a gun. I mean, whatever freedoms that are restricted here, I haven't noticed. But the increased level of security, the fact that you don't have to deal with people don't steal your stuff. You can just walk away from your stuff. It's going to be there. You get really complacent here, actually, that you just become so confident that nothing's going to happen. They run out of things to write about in the newspaper. They write about the wildlife, like the otters. That's the big thing in Singapore. They write about in the newspaper that what are the otters doing lately? There's a family of otters and they got in a fight, or they ate someone's koi fish.
We get that with
some monkeys turning over trash barrels in the north part of the city. Like, it's things like that in the newspaper, because literally nothing happens here. So it's a really peaceful place, and a lot of diversity and culture, good food. The expensive thing, real estate's expensive. If you go out drinking, which I don't do, cars are expensive, but a car is just purely a status symbol here. And you have a really low tax rate. So it's, even though, innately you would not think Singapore is a good place to lean fire. And it probably isn't, or not, maybe not lean fire or fire at all. But it probably isn't when you weigh it with, some of the cheaper places in the world. But if you're a guy like me that is not, so dead set on laying on the beach or retiring completely, that, I still enjoy working. I just turned 41 last month. So at this point in my life, it seems really good for me. And I've already saved enough. Like, I don't have to continue saving, although we are able to save here 40-50% a month, even with a nanny and all the supposed expenses of Singapore. Like, we go to it's called the Bird Park near here. It's like a tourist trap. It's like a zoo, but they had a promotion where for the price of 1 day entry, you could get a year-long pass. So we got that. Now we'll go down there for an hour or two, late in the day after it rains. And it's a pretty cool place. It's like a really awesome park. You wouldn't, I don't think you would go there every day if it costs you the entry fee, the daily entry fee. But when it's free like that, it's a good place to. They got a water park in there. There's beaches in Singapore, really good beaches. They're not like, it's not like Fifi or Bondi but they're pretty awesome beaches. I mean, they're clean and tropical. So I think it's a really underrated city.
Yeah, I think you've definitely piqued our interest in it. And so I think one item I kind of want to make a point almost just for our audience, that something that came very clear to me as you've told us kind of your story and your travels is, despite all these different countries that you've spent time in or lived in, you seem to constantly find opportunities to life hack or kind of pursue the lean fire path, regardless of really your surroundings. So whether that was in the United States, Australia, Indonesia, or Singapore. And so I think that's just awesome. I just kind of wanted to highlight that for our listeners right now, that, you're living proof that kind of regardless of where you live, you can find opportunities to optimize your life, to reduce your personal overhead by house hacking or rent hacking or living with roommates. And
not only that, you have control over where you live. People talk about the living expenses that they have to deal with. You are in full control of your living expenses. And if where you live right now is too expensive or you're making it too expensive for yourself, you can always move somewhere else.
Yeah. And also, and that's the big, when you move somewhere. So I've moved countries 4 times. So I have like kind of a template or a process I go through. That's the first thing. Figure out where you live, and you want to live really close to work, as close as possible. I notice a lot of people don't do it that way. They think, they always ask, you see people on the internet, where's the cool place to live? It's Singapore, I think, is every place is cool. Every place is nice. I guess some places are better than others, but you live too far away from work, then you start spending, an hour or 2 hours a day, more sometimes, in traffic. It makes your life worse. And it adds up. It's just the same as like compound interest. It's like compound time. It's all right. Maybe today 1 hour is okay, but it's not just today. It's today, tomorrow, the next day, back and forth, and it wears you down. So you make a small radius around where you're going to go most often, which is usually work. Maybe it depends on what you're moving there for, and then you find the best circumstance that you can within proximity to work. When you're close to where you work, then you have more options to do things like walk or bike or ride share, or other opportunities come up. But people, a lot of times they don't think about it in the right way, and you don't know what you'll find either. Like I found so many cool things around here that you just go out and look around. You just walk around, talk to people.
Yeah, you drive past it otherwise, but when you're on your bike I've seen on your blog you had a trailer that you tow behind your bike with your kids. Like that's when you start stopping to smell the flowers and you start realizing all the things that are within that small radius of your
you really
own
discover
place.
You can't see that stuff from a car. You have to get out on foot. Yeah, and that's when you find so much more from a bike. And bike riding is really fun. I had one issue with it. In Sydney, I got hit by a truck. So you have to remember safety, with bike riding. And that scared me. I mean, who cares how much money you save or how healthy you are if you get killed by a car because you're stupid. I wasn't actually stupid. They just didn't see me. So you have to always be aware of that with bike riding. Some people use that as an excuse to avoid bike riding, though. But I've always thought it's fun. It's like when you're a kid, you love it, right? I remember when I was a kid, I loved bike riding. So
it's a risk-benefit trade-off. And I think riding a bike, it comes with its risks, but all of the things that comes along as benefit I think it makes it totally worth it. So you definitely sold us on the idea of Singapore. Is there like a lot of red tape that you need to cut through in order to come there from another country, or how does that work?
Well, you can visit easily. Like it's easy to visit, but you'd want to find a job, most likely. You'd want to find employment. And if you have the right skill set, if you have certain, and there's a lot of industry here. Almost every big company is here because Singapore is a tax haven. There's a few places in the world like that, but Singapore is probably the top one. Singapore it's a little island at the end of the Malaysian peninsula, and they don't even have enough land here because so many companies want to build more places here. So they're bringing in land from like Cambodia or somewhere to fill in the sea and make it bigger. I can see it out the window where I'm working. They've been doing that for years. They call it land reclamation. So all the big companies are here. They do, especially manufacturing companies will set up. So they do some of their processing in one place and then they ship it somewhere else and do some of the processing there. And everywhere where they do processing, it adds value to their product, and then they're taxed on that value that's added. So wherever the most value is added, they try to set that up in tax havens so it reduces their tax rate. So if you have a skill that you can offer companies, anything from, it doesn't have to be technical either. Like we have like HR people, we have sales people, it's all sorts of people. But I found it through, the job I found here was through people I know, like my personal network of friends. Facebook is really what's helped me. I have a really wide group of friends from living in all these different places. Not even really close friends, just people I kind of keep up with, Well, one of these jobs It came from a girl that I hadn't really talked to in years, but we used to sit beside each other, and we used to be, I guess, reasonably close, but we hadn't talked in 8 or 9 years. But someone offered her a job, and she couldn't take it because of her family situation. And she said, I know someone who might. And that's how it came to me. So,
wow. That really shows the value of networking. We try and preach that every day.
Yeah, often that your network is just as important as your net worth.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I think.
And so we noticed, Aaron, that you've mentioned on your blog that you think that a lot of people approach traveling kind of in a less than efficient manner, or maybe that a lot of people approach or have a view of traveling that's misunderstood, this idea of having a return ticket. So do you mind just kind of walking us through your approach to travel? Is it slow travel, or how would you kind of describe your approach to travel?
Yeah, I think back to, when I first started doing it, especially when I went to Australia, one-way ticket, or maybe I'll step back from that for a minute. Airplanes haven't been around but like 100 years, right? But traveling's been around a long time. So the way people used to travel, they would get on boats. They didn't think about coming back home. They were going one way. You may never see them again. Now we do it. We're tourists. We come have a look. We follow the tourist trail, and not to say that that's necessarily a bad thing. That's all some people want to do. But if you really want to get to know a place, get to know people, you want to be part of it. You don't want to be looking back. There's some quote I can't quite remember. Don't look down, don't look back. So a return ticket, that's an escape plan. You want to go through it. You want to go. That's not the way you want to be thinking when you go somewhere to live. Go one way. Go to stay. Go give it a fair chance. That doesn't mean, like with me, I haven't stayed any of these places forever, but I never knew when the end was. In my mind, it was forever. I don't know. Maybe I didn't just think, I'm just going to be here forever, but I never thought about leaving. I never thought that, on this day, I'm going to leave. I'm going to stay here 1 year. I'm going to leave, or I'm going to stay 5 years, because the way I look at it, and sometimes I really have a hard time answering this question, especially in interviews, that question about what's your 5-year plan. I can't tell you for sure, because I don't know what good might come along. Things pass by you. You might get a really good opportunity that might lead you in a different direction. So I think you just always, it's like riding a wave. You ride that wave until a better one comes along. Don't just jump off of it just because you get some bad feelings, or, so many people, they're impatient. They don't endure. Sometimes you just need to buckle down and endure, that's a big thing with this community of fire that I see is I feel like it's just a lot of people that just hate their jobs. And all of us kind of, all of us are going to have days where we don't like our jobs. You don't have to love your job, but one of the easiest, cheapest things that you can do is find a way to be happy at work, or find a way to have purpose, or find a way to change your mind to, look at it differently. I did it myself from early on. Those early years, I was probably clinically depressed. Now I see what I do is something that adds value to the world and does good in the world, even though I might just be doing some mind-numbing spreadsheet. I know it's a piece of the puzzle. It's something important. Keeping a positive attitude it's a really cheap, easy thing to do to help you endure, especially if you don't have enough money to quit right now or retire. That's, may as well be happy with it. And also, don't quit until something better comes along. Wait, endure, because things happen that you don't know. Like some of these jobs, like the one I told you about that the girl sent me from Facebook, I wasn't the first choice. Several of these jobs, I wasn't the first choice. But, people quit, things change, management moves around, things happen that you don't know. New opportunities.
I think it's smart to, you're talking about riding the wave. I think that's a great way to look at things, as long as you are open to opportunities while riding that wave. Because a lot of people will do that for, a dozen years, and you don't want to just riding the wave could be similar to staying in your comfort zone. And you're not the type of person that seems to do that, which is neat, because you're riding that wave, but you're kind of going with the flow, but you're also jumping on opportunities when they present themselves.
Well, like Australia, like Australia is a perfect example. When I said I had to take that pay cut, I had to. It's not always so storybook, but I did. I jumped off. That Australia wave came by, and I jumped off the one that I was on and was higher paid. And eventually, my pay came back up. But I had to make a decision then, or when I quit in Australia and went back to America to sell houses. That was also another time where I made a decision. But you should be kind of sloth about those decisions, like not be, I think, I don't know, maybe it's people have different, some people aren't that sloth about it and it seems to work out for them. Some people, it seems like they switch jobs yearly or every 2 years and they do really well with money. But I guess money wasn't my only motivation. I've filled up 3 passports. I've got a 20-month-old baby sleeping back there that already speaks and understands 3 languages. Yeah. I have a really, really awesome wife. Like my wife, I can't, like, she just loves to cook for me and take care of me. And the same with me for her. I wouldn't have found her if I didn't get out and go other places. Like when we're from 2 different worlds, she grew up, in a Muslim family, and I grew up in America. So money wasn't my only motivation either. I guess that's another thing to keep in mind.
I like how you definitely kind of blur the lines between the short-term travel and like the long-term actually living in a place. So I assume that that's probably why you tend to prefer renting versus owning, or is there other reasons that you kind of fall in those lines?
I was telling you about when I left Australia, it was starting to bug me that I didn't own anything. And I did buy something. I bought a condo, and I rent it now. I lived in it right around 2 years. Downtown, real estate, really nice place, luxury, floor to ceiling windows. You can see the Rocky Mountains, but I only lived in it 2 years. And after that, it hasn't really bothered me about renting. And I look back on it in hindsight, the fact that I had roommates and all, I don't think it hurt me. I think also it helped me. There would have been a few times if I had bought a place, I don't know that I could have, because the economy was bad for a few years. It was hard to sell a house. I might have gone upside down. I might not have been able to take some of these opportunities that came along. But that said, I do think that real estate is a good decision for most people, especially people that are settled down, married with kids. And I think you really can't go wrong. You can make poor decision living too far from work, things like that. But I think if you're going to be somewhere for a while and you're going to be somewhere for a while, don't worry too much about what the price level is right now or just like everything else, don't try to time it. Just save your money and get into it, get a house and you'll be better off for it in the long run. I think most people actually have most of their wealth tied up in their house. And I have one and it's done pretty good. I bought it at the right time. It's a rental. I'm making money on it. It's easy. I've rented it to some European company that sends their expat employees over they started a railroad company. So it's been perfect for that because I'm not renting it like to a person. I'm renting it to a company and I'll keep it as long as it's no trouble. It's absolutely no work for me right now. And the building that it's in is restricted on the amount of rentals that they allow. So it kind of creates a little bit of scarcity of rentals there. So it's really easy to rent. But real estate also is one thing that's awesome. It's kind of a headache. Like these guys that are real into, I'm not one of these guys that wants to manage real estate. I know a lot of people do well at that, but I'd rather just buy a stock or index fund and let it go up and down and not think about it. It's just so much more hands off. And
then so just talking about kind of how you approach your investing, Aaron, we're kind of curious. You've talked about kind of this go with the flow approach, and you're still also saving like 40-50% of your income even now. Do you set out, do you reverse engineer your goals? Like, are you setting out milestones each month or year that you're trying to hit when it comes to your personal financial wealth or kind of what your passive income is, or how do you approach all that?
Back to that part where I had $4,000 and no furniture, just a mattress on the floor in Australia. That $4,000, I knew I could last 2 or 3 months if something bad happened. And since then, the way I look at it is this money is here for if something bad happens. I guess if nothing bad ever happens, now I figure I could endure about a 27-year emergency, then good. And now I'm starting more to try to help other people. We help some people in Indonesia. There's a couple girls that we're paying for their college, and a widow that used to work at the hotel I lived in. Her husband died at work, and so we send her some money. And so I guess I don't have a plan just to kick off with it yet. Right now, I'm just accumulating and looking for the best opportunities. So I have accounts. I probably have 20 some accounts, which is, they say don't have so many. And a lot of them are just small, but between 4 countries, I have, investment accounts in all 4 countries. We've just started one here in Singapore. In Singapore, there's no capital gains taxes. My wife and I are citizens of different countries. We have prenuptial agreements set up so her finances are separate from mine. So we have kind of an odd set of circumstances that probably aren't similar to many people. But since we've come to Singapore, now we're building a nest egg here. So I built a nest egg in Indonesia. I'm building a nest egg here. I've got one in America. I've got one in Australia. And I don't move things in between one to the other. I just leave them where they're at. And that actually, I think, has helped me, because I read somewhere where people that mess around with their investments, and they try to time it and change things. That's like the exact wrong thing to do. I've always been, I guess I'm smart enough to know I'm dumb. I'm smart enough to know that I don't know what to do. So I'm just going to leave it. I don't know if I move it, is that going to make me pay more taxes or, so, and I have done some dumb things. I don't want to say I haven't done anything that wasn't dumb, but for the most part, I just put it away and just leave it. And also, I guess one other thing about when I start in a new place, I feel poorer again too, which kind of helps me. It's like a psychological thing. Like, I'm in Singapore, my bank account's at zero. It's almost like I forget that I have bank accounts in other countries. I'm like, oh, I gotta build up some savings, and it gives me motivation,
That's really interesting. I've actually never heard anyone in the financial independence community kind of talk about that idea, but I love the idea of essentially building up multiple retirements almost from country to country as you move around. That's so unique. I've never heard anything like it.
And like the idea of starting over.
Yeah, I don't know that no one gave me advice about it or anything. And I didn't set out I didn't have this grand plan. It's just how it worked out. Like, I have a American retirement. Yeah, I have a retirement in all these countries.
So we wanted to jump into our last segment of the podcast. It's called our Fire Four. There are 4 kind of quick questions that we ask every guest. Our first one is just, what are you grateful for?
Well, really now, I really just love my family. And I would have even 2 or 3 years ago, I would have just laughed at if someone said, one day you're going to have a wife and kids, because I was kind of I felt like I was a playboy. I wanted to, one of my silly goals, I wanted to hear an orgasm in every language. I was just, so I thought getting married, I thought, well, that just leads to divorce. I got engaged 3 times, but then, I met this girl and we just got along so good. And what happened is I thought that I was going to have to leave Indonesia, because even then I still didn't think I was going to get married, even though I liked her a lot. I didn't see any reason to. I thought I would just live together. That was always my idea. Just what's the point of getting married? You can just live together. But we had this security issue in Indonesia. I was going to have to leave because they were going to change security policy. They didn't want Americans there because it was something to do with it was a total overreaction. We were scared of terrorism. Anyways, that didn't happen. Mm-hmm. But when it happened, I thought, well, I don't want to leave you here. I'm going to take you with me. And the only way I could take her with me as an Indonesian was marry her. So that's when that's when it came up. But then everything changed and I didn't leave Indonesia. Then I'd already asked her to marry me. So I was kind of stuck then, but it was fine. And maybe that's the only way. Actually, maybe that's the blessing in disguise. Maybe I never would have got married. Then I got married and we had these 2 babies, and it's kind of a surprise blessing. But I love coming home. I used to 5 nights a week. I used to go out and drink beer, and I don't judge people for that. I don't blame them. I loved it. I had a great time, now I can't wait to come home, see my babies, and their face lights up when they see me. It's just something I never expected. And I was a bit older than most people, and also being financially secure for it has helped a lot. Being able to get a nanny, things like that has made it easier and better. So that's the thing I'm most grateful for. Grateful I got an education. Grateful I chose a good degree. Awesome. Those are a few things. That I speak English, natively speak English. That's a big one. That because I can't speak anything else. English gets you really far in this world.
So then talking about our second question for the Fire 4 is guilty pleasures. So is there something that you spend money on that's maybe not particularly frugal, or maybe a tool that you can't live without?
I'm not like there's not too much. Now and then I'll buy a yogurt at the mall when I walk by, but I've quit doing that because I recognized what was happening, because I'm real aware of marketing and that sort of thing. I always try to avoid it, but really, really good mango yogurt. But I think I'm over that one.
That's amazing. That reminds me of one of our previous guests, Graham Steffen. Like for the longest time, one of his guilty pleasures was the $5 footlong at Subway, and just like this is not something you'd ever expect from a guy who's like living in LA and like driving like expensive cars and like.
Oh, yeah, no, Subway is they're one of the ones. These places, like, they spend millions of dollars figuring out exactly where to put that Subway. The Subway actually is right by the yogurt place. So they do all this research, so I get it. I like Subway a lot too, but I'm a little more resistant to that one. But so now I walk the long way around so I don't buy these they're $7 yogurts. They are good. They are good. I guess that's one of my guilty pleasures. And also I'm kind of a sucker for my little boy, the oldest one. He's starting to like toys. The other day we were out bike riding and I bought him a $20 stuffed animal, which is just outrageous. Even when I bought it, I thought it's a freaking stuffed animal. It doesn't do anything. It doesn't light up. It doesn't it does nothing. But he picked it out and he was walking around the store with it. And I'm soft hearted, so I bought it for him. And we ride everywhere on the bike. And within 5 minutes, he'd thrown it off the bike somewhere. It was like in a ditch. It's gone. Such a waste. I should just set $20 on fire. So I guess even little things like that. But for the most part, I'm pretty resistant to that kind of thing. I don't have too many things that I can't give up.
I love that. So is there a frugality tip or a life hack you'd like to share with the listeners, especially with such a strength and resistance like that? That's a real challenge people have in terms of maintaining their frugality. So are there any tips or anything you'd like to offer?
I talked this one over with my wife. I try to think of one that was kind of interesting, not to just give the same old things. Like my wife was like, buy secondhand stuff on the internet, which we do a lot, but everyone kind of knows that one. One that I picked up on was people that have good stuff that don't need it anymore. One time I got a really awesome deal on a car from a girl at work. Her father died, and old guys take really good care of their stuff. And not that I was sympathetic that her father died, but then she started talking about she had to clean out his house, get rid of his stuff. So I started paying attention. I knew there'd probably be some good stuff in that house. And she had this, it was a Hyundai. It was not a great car. It was like 5 or 6 years old, but the guy had only driven it like 20,000 kilometers or something like that. He just drove it to the grocery store or something. He was an old guy and kept it in the garage. You know how old guys are. They take care of every little thing, So it was like a new car. I went and looked at it, and I made her a low offer. Or I said some offer, and she refused it. She said, no, that's too much. She wanted more. But so I guess no one else wanted it or whatever. And I just waited like a month or two went by, and she called up, said, do I still want it? And I got like an almost new car it was around 5,000 Australian dollars. My girlfriend at the time drove it for a while, so that was a poor financial decision. So I sort of gave it away to my girlfriend, but I got a really good deal on something because, and I guess some people know about it, like estate sales and that sort of thing, but pay attention to things like that. Or when those guys won the lottery that I was telling you about, it was 16 of them won the lottery. What do most people do when they win $1 million? They all buy new cars. So I got two cars. Yeah. I got two $1,000 cars from those lottery winners. I got one for my friend and one for me.
That's awesome.
One of those cars I drove for several years. It was a Nissan Pulsar. I could fit an 8-foot long surfboard inside of it. It was a great car, excellent car. Got it for $1,000. It was worth at least $6,000 or $7,000. But the guy didn't care. He just won $1.5 million. He didn't care at all. So I felt like I won the lottery.
It's great that you noticed opportunities like that. That is awesome.
Secondhand stuff, that's the thing, but watch for. You have to be patient. You can't ever be in a hurry. It's got to be things that, like right now, we're looking for. We want a double stroller because we have 2 babies, but we don't need it today. We're just gonna watch what comes up. We're gonna throw some lowball offers out there, and you can do it with anything. You can do it from strollers all the way up to real estate. You throw out 20 lowball offers. Sooner or later, one of them will hit. somebody will just be ready to get up off of something. They just need to sell it. I knew a guy that got a Ford pickup truck for $50 like that one time, and it ran. But you can't expect it to happen all the time. You have to have a lot of patience with it. So I guess that's my frugal tip is, something that you don't need right away, but you want. Take your time with it and watch for people that are getting new stuff.
So our final question for you, Aaron, this is a new question we've added. So what would the hero of your movie do right now in your life? So if your life was a movie, you're the protagonist, you're the hero, what would you do?
At this moment, I'm in a movie and I'm the hero.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Maybe I've never even thought about being a hero. Let me think.
Well, I think after this podcast, you're going to be a lot of people's hero.
Oh, I think you know what I would do, because I know a lot, because I'm married into an Islamic family. I think that's one of the things that I've come to understand. Maybe I could, somehow affect that divide that we have in the world between where there's this big mistrust with Muslims and Islam and all the drama that it's causing. Like I'd go to Jerusalem or Israel or something and sort it out. I'd say, look, there's so much we have in common with what I've found out between people that grow up in Christian countries, people who grow up in Muslim countries. Pretty much they 98% believe the same thing, the same people, and I'm not really a religious person, but it shocks me at how different they believe they are when they're really, really so similar and so much the same. So I'd like to somehow end that friction. That it just seems so ridiculous that continues to be an issue. I mean, me and my wife, we come from these two different worlds, and I feel like we have a wonderful life, and we complement each other, and it makes us more interesting, and it's not something that we should be fighting over, or the friction that's caused there is something we could sort out rather easily if we put some effort into it.
Just tell them, you know what? Just why don't we go to the grocery store together, get ourselves a mango yogurt, and just enjoy life.
Yeah, get to know each other. Yeah. I mean, one of the most nerve-wracking things I've ever done is in Indonesia, go in the mosque. I'm the only white guy. They never seen a white guy in the mosque. We don't really we don't try with other cultures. We expect them to come to us and speak our language and do things their way. We don't go the other way. Go learn about them,
Yeah, so true. So yeah, we just wanted to say thank you for being on the show. And before we wrap up, we always like to get our guests to ask the audience a question. So is there a question that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I thought about this one too, because you guys gave me the prompt on this. And I know not everyone in your audience is going to know about it, but I thought maybe there might be someone because of the group of people that you appeal to. One of the things that I'm really interested in are these. Have you ever seen the houses people make out of shipping containers?
Yeah.
You know about this?
Yeah.
I think that's so cool. And I saw a really cool one the other day where it was multi-level and it just looked awesome. And one time I had an office in one where we ran out of office space. So we had people that were working in a shipping container near the building, and it had an air conditioner in it and everything was fine. So, and I know they're pretty cheap. You can get I also know I've seen on the internet, read about it. You get a piece of land out somewhere rural. You put your shipping container there and you can fix it up. You put a few of them, different designs, and there's quite a bit on the internet, but I'm not a tradesman. I'm not handy. I don't know where you start with that. So I'm not sure that I'll do it, but I'm really interested to know more about it. I could just imagine being off the grid, having solar panels, water collection, maybe a few goats, be about a mile from the beach, ride my bike down to the beach somewhere in Australia, up out in Queensland somewhere. I don't know, maybe not. Maybe none of this will ever happen.
Man, this sounds like what the hero of your movie might do.
The question I'd like to ask is, how do you acquire a shipping container, and how do you get someone to modify it for you? Is there someone like me who isn't skilled with metalworking and stuff? Although I'd like to learn things like that. Are there people out there that are professionals in that? I guess I just want some direction on that more than I've been able to. Even though I've read a lot about it, but I can't seem to get traction. Yeah.
Absolutely. If any of the listeners here know anything about that and are happy to share with Aron, definitely reach out. Where's the best place for people to reach out and get in touch with you?
They can find me on Facebook. They can email me. Dixie Down Under is my Gmail account, and I'm also on Reddit on that too. It's Dixie because I came from Virginia, and Down Under because I lived in Australia. That's how you can remember it. So send me an email is probably the best. I check that most often, or Facebook, either one. Aron Matthew Hamilton on Facebook. I'm easy to find, not well hidden or anything on the internet. I don't try to be anonymous, so they could find me pretty easily.
Well, perfect. That's awesome. So otherwise, audience members, jump over and you can check out Aron's blog. We'll have a link to it in the video description down below, and you can follow along with Expat Dad over there. And otherwise, again, just thanks so much for Aron. This was an amazing interview. I think our audience is going to get a lot from it.
Thank you so much for being on the show, Aron.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I'm sorry I did so much talking and didn't let you guys talk. I really enjoyed talking to you. And if you want to read my blog, I'm not trying to sell anything or direct anybody to anything. Keep that in mind. I'm not in any kind of pyramid scheme or anything. I just want to point that out. I'm just a guy that likes to talk about it. So, or tell people what I'm up to. I'll pay attention to what you guys post too. It was very nice talking to you. I think you got a really professional thing going here. So thanks for taking the time.
There are just so many different ways to approach fire and living life on your own terms. Aron's enthusiasm as well is just contagious.
I love episodes like this where we can have real people chasing fire through classic methods, presented by Jacob from ERE, Pete from Mr. Money Mustache. It's a reminder that everyone has control over their spending, and it's really not complicated to reach financial independence.
And while you're waiting for the next episode, jump over to Facebook and join the London on Fire community, and follow us on Instagram @OnFirePodcast.
And make sure to tune in for the next On Fire podcast, where we interview Dan DeVoe, a real estate entrepreneur leaning pretty hard toward fat fire with a lofty goal of $10 million in retirement.
Thanks for listening. This is Matt.
And Kellen, signing off.
And until next episode, remember, being normal. Buying shit doesn't make you happy. And always remember what Franklin D. Roosevelt said.
Happiness is not the mere possession of money. It lies in the joy of achievement, in the thrill of the creative effort.
They better leave us a written review.